everyone. I'd like to call the Board of Education meeting to order. The date is February 9th, 2021. We are at First Flight High School. With us we have Maureen Welsh, Dr. Keith Parker, Kelly Flora, Johanna Parker, Candy Tilley, our attorney Richard Schwartz, Rita Roberts, and Dr. Ashley McBride. We also have Margaret Lawler, Susan Bothwell, Frank Hester, Carl Woody, Sandy Kinzel, and Dr. John Farley. On the phone with us this evening, we have Joe Tauber and David Twitty and Beth Rooks. Did I say the time? The time is 5:10. I apologize for the delay. Oh, those of you that are joining us by phone, could you mute your phone unless you're going to speak, please? Okay, so if you will all join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. And as it is our tradition that we have the board member who represents the district where we are meeting do the welcome, but we decided to have the meeting up here in First Flight since we're audio. So I will do the welcome and pledge, and I just want to thank everybody for their patience and understanding during these difficult times. I know this is frustrating for a lot of people, but I think as a team we can work through this and get it together and get our kids where they need to be. Again, like I said in the last meeting, that if we could just look outside our own situation and realize that whatever happens might be right for you, but might be not so right for someone else, and just to show compassion for those of us that may not have the same feeling that we have. In addition, I also would like to remind everybody, board members and anybody who's speaking, that before you speak, please say your name for those that are listening at home so they know who's speaking. With that, I will join me in the pledge. Where is it? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you. Before we approve the agenda, I have a statement I want to read. We have received a request to amend the board agenda for the following reasons: to revise the personnel consent agenda under agenda item 9A, also to revise the second sentence in paragraph number 8 of the January 12th, 2021 special board meeting so that it reads as follows. Through January 10th, 2021, there have been 373 positive cases in that age range, and of that number, 287 were residents of Dare County. And to add policy 3420, student promotion and accountability, to the agenda item 12C for first reading and adoption. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. If not, I would like to request a motion to amend the agenda as requested. I have a motion by Ms. Lawler.
Carl Woody, I second.
A second by Mr. Woody. Since we are audio, we will do a roll call vote. I'll start with those on the phone. Mr. Tauber?
Yes.
David Twitty?
Yes.
Carl Woody?
Yes.
Frank Hester?
Yes.
Susan Bothwell?
Yes.
Margaret Lawler?
Yes.
And Mary Ellen, yes. Motion carries. So we have an amended agenda. I will now look for a motion to...
Madam Chair, Frank Hester, I move that we approve the amended agenda.
Second, Susan Bothwell.
Have a motion by Mr. Hester, a second by Ms. Bothwell to approve the amended agenda. Again, we'll do a roll call vote. Joe Tauber?
Yes.
David Twitty?
Yes.
Carl Woody?
Yes.
Frank Hester?
Yes.
Susan Bothwell?
Yes.
Margaret Lawler?
Yes.
Mary Ellen Balance is yes. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, next up we have our announcements. Dr. Farley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few quick announcements. One is some great news. So with the latest funds from the federal government that are going to be distributed to states, this is the CARES Act, which is the Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security Act. We are going to get an allotment of $2.5 million for Dare County schools to support accountability, student accountability and growth disparity in trying to close the achievement gap. So this funding will be geared towards helping kids catch up based upon all the concerns and outcomes of the pandemic. We are awaiting what those allotments are going to look like and the different ways that we're going to be able to spend that money out, but it certainly will be geared towards our summer program. We will implement tutoring programs. We could this spring if the board decides for students to return to face-to-face instruction, and certainly tutoring programs next year. We also may be able to be in a position to add some positions, all related to improved student achievement, but we're waiting for some clarity from DPI, and we hope sometime in the next couple of months we'll have access to that funding. That is a significant amount of funding. If you recall, early in the fall, around September, the district received about $625,000. So that is very good news for us. And as you know, we've talked informally in a few spots in our board meetings about our need to close the achievement gap. And this will, and we also talked about possibly building that in to a local ask. And we'll certainly will not have that need with this kind of funding. So we've got a lot of strategizing and planning, but that's really good news, and that is a very significant amount of money. A couple other announcements, just a reminder. I want to thank all our parents and staff who are listening at home. This Friday is a parent-teacher conference day. Those meetings are virtual. And then Monday is a required work day, so students will not be expected to work on those 2 days. And then lastly, we'll share as part of our presentation tonight results of our latest parent and staff survey, parent and guardian staff survey. And we had over 1,700 parents who responded to that survey. I did send the results out to all parents this morning and all staff members. Included in that email were our summer program questions in that part of the survey. We are not going to include that in our presentation tonight that has to do with reopening of schools, but we are assessing the feedback we've gotten from parents and interests. We asked for timelines. We asked for interest in instructional-based programs, recreational-based programs. In our March meeting, we will share those results. Again, everyone has those, but we will focus on feedback and summer programs in the March meeting. So very thankful for our parents who jumped into that survey quickly, and we knew we were going to get a heavy response. And that was part of the reason why we wanted to get those summer program questions out and feedback. So that's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Farley. That is very exciting to get the funding to help get our kids back where we need to be. Next up, we have recognitions. Dr. Parker?
Chairman, we have a couple recognitions we're going to share with the board and the public tonight from Cape Hatteras Secondary School. And we do have Principal Beth Rooks on the call, and she's going to share those. So, Beth, if you'd like to go ahead and do the recognitions, that'd be great.
Good evening, Madam Chair and the members of the Dare County Board of Education. Tonight, we have several recognitions that we would like to bring to your attention. First, Cape Hatteras Secondary School is honored to recognize Clay Tiedemann as our Teacher of the Year. Mr. Tiedemann began his career in teaching at Cape Hatteras Secondary in 2017, and during his time with us at CHSS, his enthusiasm for students is displayed far beyond the lessons that he plans and implements. His passion for education is most observed in his interaction with his students and colleagues. He's worked extremely hard to regenerate our hatchery program, which is vital to supporting our students' understanding of the necessity of preserving the sustainability of the Pamlico Sound. He's also worked with many community agencies, such as the Coastal Studies Institute, to rebuild our hatchery program. Additionally, Mr. Teeterman created a surf club at CHSS, and he has been fulfilling a much-needed niche for our students. And over the last several years, our club has grown from a few students surfing with Mr. Teeterman to involving community members and businesses to sponsor 2 surf competitions a year. So we would like to congratulate Mr. Teeterman. For our student recognitions, first, we would like to recognize Isabella Lettieri, who is currently a junior at Cape Hatteras Secondary. Isabella has many talents, including acting, being a champion for her classmates, and creating ways to help others. But Isabella was instrumental in creating our school newspaper, and one of her greatest talents is her ability to write. Tonight, we are recognizing her for publishing 2 articles in the Island Free Press. The first one was Cape Hatteras students get a head start on college with free COA dual enrollment program. And she also published one back in May that was entitled Island Life in the Time of COVID-19, a Cape Hatteras Student's View. So congratulations to Isabella Lettieri for her outstanding work in being a published writer. Next up, we have Liam Van Druten, who is a 6th grade student at CHSS. Upon entering 6th grade, he has embraced every virtual opportunity that we have thrown his way. Last month, he participated in a virtual training with 45 other students in grades 5 through 12 to receive federal permits to work with endangered sea turtles, collect and submit data, and handle sea turtles during the cold stunt event in coordination with N.C.G.S. as well as with NC Wildlife, and operated an intake facility for injured sea turtles. Liam has since walked the beaches and the marshes searching for cold stunned turtles in the treacherous wind and cold. To date, Liam has rescued 2 live turtles and collected information for processing 3 dead turtles. We are very proud of this young naturalist. Well done, Liam Van Druten. We also are going to be honoring Haley Roselle tonight. Haley is a junior at Cape Hatteras Secondary and is being recognized for her work with rehabilitating wild animals. Haley, while still in high school, is highly recognized within our community as well as on a state level through multiple venues, including NC Wildlife Resources Commission for her work with rehabilitating and rescuing animals. She also works with many nonprofit organizations and well-regarded professionals such as Lou Browning. She is not just a volunteer, but she's also considered a peer. So we are extremely proud of Haley Roselle on her outstanding work with wildlife rescue.
Beth, this is
Tonight,
Keith.
we will
Before you
also
go to
be
the next,
recognizing our band program.
Beth, this is
It is
Keith.
as
Before you
strong
go
as
to
ever.
the next recognition, we're just going to change something very quickly on your audio. Go ahead, Beth.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, much better.
We're ready. Thank you, Beth.
Okay, thanks. Our band program is as strong as ever. Several of our students auditioned virtually for the Eastern District Band, and the clinic will be held online with a session held by their guest conductor and a session with the motivational leadership speaker, Dr. Tim Watson-Heiser. The following students also received an invitation to attend the clinic. We have an 8th grade student, Riley Oberbeck, with the French horn, junior Elizabeth Muller, who will be playing the clarinet, and senior Christiana Distel. She is the first chair for the French horn in the Eastern District, and she will get to go audition for the All-State Band. So we would like to congratulate all of these students. Freshman student Tyler Midget is being recognized tonight for his community service. During the fall, Tyler worked closely with Kinnicky Clay Studio to carefully craft dozens of holiday ornaments. After marketing and selling his ornaments, Tyler donated all of the profits, totaling over $3,000, to Surfing for Autism. We would like to congratulate Tyler and let him know that we are very proud of him for his hard work and dedication to our community. Finally, being a firefighter is one of the most rewarding and selfless jobs that a person can commit themselves to doing. The junior firefighters of Hatteras Island have committed themselves at a young age to helping the community around them by embracing the idea of putting others before themselves. Tonight, we are going to recognize the many students who have committed themselves to this challenge. From the Buxton Volunteer Firefighting, Eric Fulcher, Eliza Quidley, Victor Caldera, Nick Timochev, Amber Harrell, Daniel Heaster, and Nathan Whitehead. From Hatteras, we have McCullough Lester, Al Hodges, Brian Garcia, Cody Denton, Charlie Connor, and River Lester. From Frisco, we have John Soul. And from the Tri-Villages, we have Gavin Thompson and Ainsley Thompson. We congratulate all of these students on their hard work and dedication. This concludes all of our recognitions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Beth, we couldn't hear the first couple ones. Could you repeat Clay and Haley?
Certainly. I apologize for that.
Oh, no, it's
Cape Hatteras Secondary is honored to recognize Clay Teeterman as our Teacher of the Year. Mr. Teeterman began his career in teaching at Cape Hatteras Secondary in 2017. During his time with us at CHSS, his enthusiasm for students is displayed far beyond the lessons that he plans and implements. His passion for education is most observed in his interactions with students and his colleagues. Mr. Tiedemann has worked extremely hard to regenerate our hatchery program that is vital to supporting our students' understanding of the necessity of preserving the sustainability of our Pamlico Sound. He has worked with community agencies such as the Coastal Studies Institute to rebuild our hatchery program. Mr. Tiedemann has also created a surf club. This has fulfilled a much-needed niche for many of our students. Over the last years, our club has grown from just a few students surfing with Mr. Tiedemann to involving community members and businesses to support 2 surf competitions a year. And we'd like to congratulate Mr. Tiedemann on an honor well-deserved. Our student recognitions, were you able to hear those?
We heard a little bit of Haley's.
Okay, so first off, we would like to recognize Isabella Lettieri, who is currently a junior at CHSS. Isabella has many talents, including acting, being a champion for her classmates, creating ways to help others. Isabella was instrumental in creating our school newspaper. And tonight we are recognizing her for her publishing of 2 articles in the Island Free Press. The first one was Cape Hatteras students get a head start on college with free COA dual enrollment program. And the second one that she published, which was back in May, was Island Life in the Time of COVID-19, a Cape Hatteras student's view. We would like to congratulate Isabella Lettieri for her outstanding work in being a published writer. We also have Liam Van Druten, who was one of our 6th grade students at CHSS. Upon entering 6th grade, Liam has embraced every virtual opportunity that has been thrown his way. Last month, he participated in a virtual training with 45 other students in grades 5 through 12 to receive federal permits to work with endangered sea turtles, collect and submit data, and handle sea turtles during the Cold Stun event in coordination with the N.C.G.S program as well as NC Wildlife. Liam has since walked the beaches and the marshes searching for cold-stunned turtles in treacherous wind and in the cold. To date, Liam has rescued 2 live turtles and collected information for processing 3 of the dead turtles that he found. We are extremely proud of this young naturalist. Well done, Mr. Liam Van Druten. Haley Roselle is a junior at CHSS, and she's being recognized tonight for her tireless work in rehabilitating wild animals. Haley, while still in high school, is highly recognized in the community as well as on the state level through multiple venues, including NC Wildlife Resources Commission for her work with rehabilitating and rescuing animals. She also works with many nonprofit organizations and well-regarded professionals such as Lou Browning, and not just as a volunteer, but as a peer. We are extremely proud of Haley Roselle on her outstanding work with the wildlife rescue.
Thank you, Beth. I appreciate you reading that through again so everybody could hear.
I apologize for not being heard.
Oh, no, I think it was, I might have been on this end, but that's okay. Thank you for repeating that, and congratulations to all of those that were recognized. We have a very robust community down there in Hatteras, and my son was also a member of the junior firefighters, and to see it has spread across the island is really impressive, as well as the surf team. So thank you for all you students that care about our community. Okay, next up we have instructional highlights, and I think, is Beth helping with that too?
All right, thank you, Madam Chairman. We're going to play a video tonight that summarizes the instructional highlight, and I would say here to our board members that are joining us on the phone that you will not be able to hear the video on the phone, but if you did look at the YouTube feed right now, you'll be able to see and hear the video. So we're very excited about a very unique and creative initiative that Principal Rooks has worked with one of her teachers and Johanna Parker to bring to us. So we're going to let the video speak for itself, and then afterwards Beth will be available to also answer any questions or to field any comments the board may have. So Joe, we'll go ahead and start that.
My name is Brooke Roselle, and I teach My name is Brooke Roselle, and I teach Spanish at Cape Hatteras Secondary School. Last semester, I had a Spanish 3 and 4 class that is entirely made up of heritage speakers. And a heritage student is someone who is raised in a home where a non-English language is spoken. And that means they have a cultural connection or at least some degree of proficiency in a second language. And the biggest difference between a heritage learner and a heritage Spanish course and a regular advanced Spanish course is that in a heritage course, we focus on creating a bilingual safe space for students. In a world where speaking a second language at home could be considered a barrier, we are reframing that narrative to show our students that being bilingual is a superpower. Our overarching theme for the semester is the exploration of their own cultural identity, ownership through literacy reflection, and using their language proficiency in service to community. 1 in 6 students at CHSS is considered a heritage speaker, meaning that they have roots in a second language or speak Spanish to some degree of proficiency at home. Dare County Schools has made such an incredible progress over the last few years with the creation of the Dual Language Immersion Program. With this has come so much opportunity for partnership between DLI and the existing world language programs at the secondary level. From this, the partnership and the virtual playgroups were born. The purpose of the virtual Spanish playgroups was to provide a student-directed space for the K-3 DLI students to be immersed in Spanish through story, movement, and play. These sessions were totally planned and hosted by my heritage learners. In these playgroups, the students played, they danced, they did scavenger hunts, they participated in interactive readings, and had the opportunity to connect with others fully in Spanish.
We were feeling nervous because we didn't know if they were going to understand us, if they knew what was going on. But after seeing them and hearing them speak Spanish, we feel like they understood a lot, like more than we expected, like a lot. It was good, it was exciting.
I think it was really important for us too because we got to see like the kids
like learn and have fun, and like their smiles like actually like brought me joy, and I thought I was actually doing it right. Felt like I was actually doing something for my community. And my brother talks about the play groups all the time still, and it makes me happy that he got something from it.
Not only did these sessions provide an amazing virtual immersion opportunity for the DLI students, but they were also a full circle experience for my students who stepped into a place of ownership of their language by using their Spanish in service to others in their school community. My students walked away from this opportunity with so much pride in themselves and in their bilingualism. Seeing this as their teacher was a truly indescribable experience. I'm hopeful for the continued partnership between World Languages, our heritage learners, and DLI. We have the responsibility to use our resources to empower every student at every level from every background. These playgroups were an excellent first step.
Adios! Aplausos!
That our students are participating in.
Madam Chair, this is David, remotely on the phone. It was awesome. It's really nice to see those kids interact with their peers, you know. She does an outstanding job.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Beth.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Next up, we have public comment. Dr. Parker, do we have any comments?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair, we do have some public comments tonight, so if you'll...
Before you start, let me read. The Dare County Board of Education welcomes the opportunity to hear from the public during its regularly scheduled meetings. The portion of the meeting is for the board as a whole to hear matters of interest or concern from the public. Public comment is not intended to be a dialogue for question and answers or for impromptu board responses. The board may determine whether to provide information or responses to public comments if it is necessary or appropriate at a later time. Concerns regarding school personnel are usually most effectively addressed with the administration at the school level or at central office or through other existing board policies, and those alternatives are encouraged by the board. The board appreciates courteous and respectful presentations. According to policy 2340, each person or organization is granted 3 minutes for his or her presentation. Obscene, vulgar, indecent, abusive, threatening, or profane statements or statements reasonably perceived to be disruptive or imminently threatening to the orderly operation of the meeting shall not be permitted. Speakers are asked to begin by stating your full name and address. You may provide your address to the board secretary, a sign-up sheet, but we are collecting them by email right now. So, Keith?
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. And Georgia, are you timing? Okay, thank you. All right. Our first comment tonight is from Adriana Carroll, and the comment says, will we still have EOGs, the end of course exams? The next comment is from Tracy Flores, and the comment is, I would like to know if anyone from the Dare County Board of Education has reached out to neighboring counties or any county that has been open to in-person learning and have received information on how they have handled a positive COVID case in the classroom. If the above has been done, has the information been provided with Sheila Davies so she can help guide our county in how to move forward if it is voted to go back to face-to-face learning? If neighboring counties have done exactly as we have, quarantining the entire class for one positive case, is it that they have enough substitutes, and that is how they have been able to not close the entire school? I would like this matter discussed in detail, as it seems to be the reason we have not been face-to-face. I think we can gain some insight by knowing what one or two or more of the 90 counties have done to keep students and staff safe. I realize things may have to be adapted to our county, but getting information from other counties can really help guide us. Thank you. The next comment is from Hannah Yetzer and goes, please read aloud the position statement from the American Academy of Pediatrics and CDC to ensure the community you're considering the evidence of medical providers. The next comment is from Christina Gordon. As an emergency physician, I have an intimate understanding of COVID and implore you to return to in-person learning for all students. The damage currently being done far outweighs the risk, particularly now that teachers have been immunized. I have continued to do my job safely throughout this pandemic, and they can also. The quarantine protocols during the last attempt at face-to-face learning were excessive and led to the transition to remote due to lack of staff. This needs to be discussed. The next comment has been submitted by Dr. and Mrs. Chavez, excuse me. The comment reads, our teachers are trying, parents are trying, but nothing about this is high quality education. Please stop referring to it as such. You as a board made that abundantly clear in your unwillingness to host a virtual board meeting, stating it was not productive. We are requesting in-person learning commence with adjustments made to the current quarantine and close contact policies. We are asking you to take time and effort to ask more than just superficial questions. In terms of the quarantine and close contact policies Ms. Davies has put in place, she has stated she is just following the state, and you take this at face value. The state of North Carolina released guidelines and left the interpretation of them up to local Department of Health and Human Services offices to create policies for their communities. Have you asked who she included on her team? Have you asked why other schools are in person and we are not? Per our governor, 90 out of 115 districts are in-person learning. 90 other districts interpreted the guidelines in such a way that they supported their students to go back to school safely and efficiently without major outbreaks as well. Why are we not quarantining every soccer player who was in close contact with the COVID-19 positive player, but we are quarantining an entire class when it happens in a classroom? The hypocrisy is deafening, and we deserve better. COVID is not going away. We are not going to be back to normal anytime soon. You as a board are accountable for the ensuring that our children in Dare County receive the best quality education possible, and we ask that you rise to that responsibility. We need your leadership to be proactive with a plan that is best for all children, simply not a reaction to the current situation. It is imperative that decisions be made for our students, given the most accurate information possible. There is undeniable harm being caused by virtual learning, as evidenced by an uptick in mental health issues among our youngest members of this community, and this needs to be a bigger part of the equation when determining not just getting kids back to school, but keeping them there. The next comment is from...
Who was that last comment from?
It was from Dr. and Mrs. Chavez.
Chavez, you say?
Chavez.
Chavez.
C-H-O-V-A-Z.
The next comment is from Kristen Shackelford. And the comment begins by referencing a link to a CDC study, and then the comment begins. This CDC study suggests schools can and should reopen for in-person learning. This study further points to evidence of community spread being lower in communities where children are in school. As a working single parent who's paid $3,200 for virtual learning and another $450 for Spanish tutoring to date in attempts to piece together an education for my child, I know I am not alone when I say that the schools need to open. The evidence supports it, the science supports it. Now it's time for the Dare County School Board to support our students returning to school. And our final comment is from Pat Gale, and the comment reads, will teachers need to quarantine if exposed after they have received 2 vaccines and have passed the waiting period? If they do, won't the quarantining affect the ability to staff as it has in the past? And that concludes the comments that were submitted, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. And thank you for your comments, everyone who sent them in. Next up, we have the approval of the consent agenda, which includes the personnel consent agenda, minutes for the January 12th special meeting, the January 12th regular meeting, budget amendments, and a donation to the First Flight High School athletic donation.
Madam Chair, I move we approve the consent agenda. This is Margaret Lawler.
I have a motion by Margaret Lawler,
I second.
second from Ms. Bothwell. Any discussion? Okay, we'll do roll call vote. David Twitty?
Yes.
Joe Tauber?
Yes.
Carl Woody?
Yes.
Frank Hester?
Yes.
Susan Bothwell?
Yes.
Margaret Lawler? And I also vote yes, so motion carries unanimously. And next up, we have reports, items for information. Dr. Farley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first report is the school mental health support personnel local report requirement. This will be the quickest report of the year. So about 2 years ago, the General Assembly in General Statute 115C 316.2 requires the superintendent on an annual basis to report to the Board of Education the following: the total number of each category of mental health support personnel employed in the unit or district, and the difference from the previous year in the total number of each category of school mental health personnel support in the district. So currently we have 16 guidance counselors. That number has not changed. We have 4 school psychologists. That is an increase of 1 from the previous year, because at the time of report we had a vacancy. And following the guidelines of this report, with the timing, we're reporting 2 social workers. However, because we had COVID-related funding this fall, we've actually hired a 3rd, but it didn't fit the category of the time span. So, and those social workers we employed for the first time in Dare County Schools 2 years ago. They're doing fantastic work, and adding the 3rd social worker is very beneficial. So,
Question.
yes.
Mary Ellen Balance. With the money that you reported that we would be getting, is it possible to be, if need be, we put more additional funding into social mental for our students?
Yes, that certainly will be an area that we will consider. Again, we need to get the guidelines from the state about the different allotments and where we can spend that money and why. But certainly looking at mental health support, given the outcomes of the pandemic, this will definitely be an area that we'll focus on. Good question. Anybody else? Thank you, Madam Chair. The second report or items for information is secondary project updates, and Dr. Parker and Ms. Kinsel will lead that conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Farley. We would like to update the board on a couple of things with the secondary schools right now. So I would direct you to this presentation, and a couple of things we wanted to highlight for the board is some work we've done around scheduling students and preparing for next year. And the first thing is we have done quite a bit of work on our program of studies. So we'll go to that next one there, Joe. And I want to give you just some screenshots of what this new document is going to look like. Now, we for a long time have had a program of studies document, but we've gone through a process in the last couple of months to update and revise portions of that document. One is our goal is to make that document, and we work on this every year. This is a process that is continuing, but we want that document to be very user-friendly to students and parents. And so we go through it and we try to find language that might be specific to educators and not easily understandable by parents, and we try to reword that. And we try to make the document flow in a way where a parent of an incoming freshman could access the document and get a a really clear glimpse of, what's my child got to do to graduate from school. And so the purpose of this document is not exclusively for our educators, but it's really a parent and student document to help them navigate an introduction to high school. Because we want our incoming freshmen to know exactly what they've got to do to graduate. And that's one of the reasons why we are very fortunate to have a higher graduation rate in our county than most other counties, because our guidance staff in particular works so hard with students to make sure they're scheduled for the right courses. And this is just another part of that to enhance that work so that our students and parents are very clear on what we're offering. We have added a section to the document, and one piece I will mention is this document up until this year has been a printed PDF document we've provided. We're transitioning this to be a fully online document. And so parents and students and teachers and counselors will be able to go to our website. The benefit to this is we can make adjustments to the document and updates through the year. We don't have to print other copies or make other PDFs. So that's one benefit here. We have added a section to the front of the document I think is going to be helpful, and it's essentially a list of, if I'm a high schooler or the parent of a high schooler, who should I contact with questions? And we think this will be a nice directory piece there, and parents will be able to click right on the name of the counselor, principal, or director and be able to immediately email them or get information on them. So we think that'll be helpful. As you can see here, that a big portion of this document, and these are two screenshots from the graduation requirement page, and then the required courses mandated by the legislator and DPI. And so what we do is we lay out very specifically exactly what credits kids have to take and exactly what would fulfill that credit. So we want to be very clear. There have been some curriculum changes in the last couple of years, and particularly this year. So we've got a couple of these charts in here because we want parents to fully understand exactly what's required. And there may be different requirements for an incoming ninth grader this year than there were 3 years ago. And so our goal has been to simplify some of those changes for parents. And then finally, the meat of the document is the actual course catalog. And you can see here that we have a description for every course that we offer in high school here. So parents and students can go through and read about exactly what could I expect if I sign up for American History 1 or World History, and would I want to sign up for particular classes. So the course catalog is really the meat of the Programs of Studies document, and we're continuing to refine that to make sure if students choose particular courses, they know what they're signing up for. So that's one highlight we wanted to share with the board of some work we're doing. This document is in a late draft phase, and we hope to this week have it finalized and made available. Our principals and counselors have been giving us feedback on this process, and we've been working on it for a little bit here, and we hope this week that we will be able to then release it to schools and students. Any questions or comments on that? Great. The next thing we'll talk about is some work we've been doing with just the general course registration process and scheduling. As the board remembers, we moved our high schools to a 4x4 block schedule in August, and traditionally our high schools have been on a hybrid schedule, meaning before August our students were able to take 7 classes a year, and some of those classes were 90 minutes in length each semester, and some were 55 minutes that ran throughout the course of the year. And so that's why we called it a hybrid. And so there were some challenges with keeping that hybrid schedule on remote learning because we felt that some kids would potentially not be as successful if they stayed in a course all year. There could be a benefit of changing courses at the semester turnover. And so our teachers and principals had a lengthy discussion on this, and we did move to a 4x4 block, meaning that every course is now 90 minutes. And all students got 4 new courses in January when the semester rolled over. And so that's a new feature of our schedule that we didn't have. There have been a lot of benefits in that in that for remote learning, but one of the features of the hybrid schedule was that students could take some courses all year long. And we know that students can benefit for that. Depending on the course, there's a benefit of being in a course all year. And so we've made some modifications to this 4x4 block schedule so that some students can stay in courses year long, and we just wanted to share some highlights of that with you. But our goal was basically to maximize our schedule in a way where it increases what kids can do during the day. So a schedule obviously is just how you allocate time. What's probably more important is what you do with the time. And so working with teachers to continue to increase instructional practices is one part of it. But our goal has been to maximize our schedule, and we think that this new modified 4x4 block does that. This is example what I'm talking about. So students now on this schedule will be able to receive up to 8 credits a year. So that means if a student took no high school courses in middle school, they come in their freshman year, they could get up to 32 credits and graduate with 32 credits because they can get 8 a year. This is what it would look like on this new schedule. Students would receive or have received 4 courses each semester, and they're each 90 minutes in length. Some modifications we're making for next year is giving principals the ability to allocate 2 blocks throughout the year. In the case of this math example, some of our students go into 9th grade and they take a Foundations of Math course, and then they take a Math 1 course. The Math 1 is the requirement from the state legislator. In this model, students will be able to be in math all year long, so they will increase their proficiency in the concepts, but they'll be able to get 90 minutes of math every day for the entire school year. That essentially doubles what they could have gotten last year on the hybrid schedule. So we think by going from the 55-minute year-long block time to 90 minutes every day, that's really going to give kids an opportunity to go deep into the math curriculum. So that's just one example there, and I show that to you to say that some students will take a 90-minute course, they'll complete it in January, they'll get a new one. Some kids will have some courses that will go for the length of the school year. So this new feature of the 4x4 is going to give us a lot of possibilities with scheduling. It's going to increase the number of courses kids can take, but it's also going to double the length of time some kids have in certain courses. And those are some really attractive features.
And it provides some flexibility as opposed to the traditional 4x4 at the principal's discretion and needs of students at the school.
And the final thing I'll share that we're working on with scheduling right now is we realize that there is a significant need to provide students with remediation and intervention, particularly given that some students have struggled with remote learning. And so our principals have been working on, in the event that students return to school at some point, how does the school day look, and are there times where kids can just back up and say, I need some tutoring or I need some help? And we think that's an important feature of the school day, is time where you're not necessarily learning new content. You're saying, look, let me just get a little help on what you taught last week. I need to get some independent time with the teacher. We know that there will be restrictions on movement in the school with social distancing and safety protocols. So we've really looked at ways where students can get remediation from the teacher, but also do it in a safe and responsible way. And I want to show you 2 options that our high school principals and middle school principals are looking at to give remediation time to students. This will vary per school because each of our schools have needs, and they have different populations of students and different numbers of kids. So this is not a decision our principals have made yet in every context, but I want to give you 2 examples of something we're exploring. One example is, and we'll go back to that one, Joe. There you go. One example is to build in just a dedicated block of remediation time at the same time every day. And in this model, after first block, students would go to remediation. Every kid in the building would remediate at that time, and they get intervention at that time. Whichever way the principals and teachers would decide. It might be that on Monday, every kid gets math intervention. On Tuesday, every kid gets English intervention. So there's flexibility on what you remediate during that time, but in this model, the time is solid. It's always after first block. The second model we're looking at varies, and essentially another benefit of the 4x4 is it adds the ability for us to do creative things with the time. So in this model, we're adding 30 minutes on the end of each course, and we rotate it through the week. So for example, on Monday, first block becomes 90 minutes plus 30 minutes there. So the teacher would teach new content for 90, and then she would go in and do 30 minutes of remediation. On Tuesday, first block is just regularly 90 minutes. After that, kids go to second block. The teacher on Tuesday would teach 90 minutes of new content and then remediate for 30 minutes. So in this model, every teacher gets 30 minutes, but a fourth period teacher is not going to get their 30-minute remediation time until Thursday. On Friday, we could add that time back into the blocks and extend them. So the block scheduling just gives us a lot of creativity to be able to manipulate the individual blocks and add time to it. So we think this is a very important feature of our schedules, in part because we want to keep pushing kids to move forward, but we also know that there needs to be time for kids to step up and say, look, I need some tutoring and help on what I'm doing. So some brief updates there I wanted to share with the board. Be glad to have questions or conversation.
And this is Farley. Go ahead, Margaret.
I was just going to say, with example 2, are you adding 30 minutes to the school day?
That example does indicate if the school day were extended, I believe, by 15 minutes.
Okay.
But the other benefit of this schedule, Ms. Lawler, is because we have now taken away some of those 55-minute courses, believe it or not, the 90-minute block actually allows us to have longer class periods. So that model is not necessarily having to extend the school day. It's just reducing from 5 classes a day to 4, lets us get up to that 90 minutes. That wasn't a great answer, but the short answer is no. It wasn't extending by 30 minutes.
But this is Farley. You were reading my mind, Margaret, because my point was going to be we're exploring models where we would increase the school day next year by 15 minutes. We think that's reasonable. We have in our elementary schools in the last couple of years increased instructional time. Typically, Dare County schools, elementary schools are about 6.5 hours. Many across the state are 7. This is a strategy for us to try to shorten that achievement gap, short and long term. And so we're going to be coming to the board. We're studying different models with our bell schedule, because if you move it's much easier to move all your schools 15 minutes one way or the other, add 10 in the morning, 5 on the back end, whatever that may be. So we've got to align this with transportation. As you recall, in the December meeting, I had informed the board that we were studying different ways that we could close achievement gaps. And this one we talked about summer programs, tutoring. We would love to be in a position if the community was behind this, and if we could, the calendar law could change, but that is something that's not going to happen anytime soon. One of the strategies obviously is to have more instructional time. So there's 2 routes you can go. Increase the school calendar, which many of our students, parents, staff members in the community don't want to do because of second jobs and summer vacations and so on. So then the other way is to increase the school day. So we are considering an increase of 15 minutes, but also, to Keith's point, to be very precise with how we're using that time. When you add 15 minutes through the course of the year and use it wisely and take advantage of those opportunities, it can make a difference. So we'll be coming back to that in March, but that's certainly in line with the remediation plan as part of our schedules we're looking at K-12.
And one other thing I would add too is this schedule now allows every high school teacher to have a 90-minute planning period every day. And previously on our hybrid schedule before August, some teachers did have 90 minutes of planning daily, but some had 55 minutes. And that was depending on what courses they taught in that particular schedule. So we think that's a feature that our teachers will really appreciate. And that's a really healthy dosing of planning. We think teachers will be able to accomplish a lot during that time.
Dr. Parker, Frank Hester, and this is all based on us being back in school next year?
It is in part, but also we moved to the 4x4 in August because it's helpful for kids also to just have those 4 classes if they're going to be remote. But some of the pieces I just showed you is with the belief that kids will return to school. Obviously, if they don't, then the remediation would have to look a lot different. But in terms of the 4x4 and having 4 classes a semester, that will maintain regardless. But this is on the presumption that kids will return. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I'm Sandy Kinsel. I just want to point out to the board and to the general public the enormous amount of work that goes into trying to design a master schedule that promotes equity across the district. Dr. Parker did a great job of leading the principals. Our principals would walk away and do hours of work and come up with models, and then we discuss it. And so I just want to say my appreciation for the work that they're doing to be able to come up with something that we feel like is going to not only benefit our students, but really help our teachers be able to get more meat and more time, instructional time for our students. Thank you.
Thank you. You guys do a great job of preparing information for sure, and getting input from all stakeholders. David, did you or Joe have anything to add?
Well, Madam Chair, just a bit. We were on 4x4 some years ago. Is that right, Keith?
That's correct, David.
Yeah, and it worked pretty well, and I think the staff liked that. Is that saying so?
The I can't speak to staff perception when you're on it before, but what we've gathered from staff currently is that one of the big attractions is staff would generally be teaching 3 classes a day and have the 90-minute planning period, and our teachers think they really could get a lot of work done and utilize that planning period. So that's been one positive feature that we've gotten from teachers. And I'd say generally there's been a lot of positive feedback from teachers on it now.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to let people know that we have tried that before, and it's worked for us. So it's not that we're not going in new territory that we don't know the outcome. So that's a good thing.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any other questions on that? One more item?
Yes. Item C under reports for item for information. This actually could be quicker than A. So, report on, and everyone at home waiting for reopening of schools is saying hallelujah. Report on board meeting video streaming project. Dr. Parker has been working with our technology department, and we will be ready to televise live meetings at our next meeting, and the board will meet here at First Light High School on March 9th. So that will be available through live feeds. So
Thank you. That's exciting.
progress.
Exciting. All right, and we have no unfinished business, so we'll move on to new business, which I think everybody at home is waiting on. Reopening of schools. Dr. Farley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we'll start with our agenda. Going to do a brief overview of how we got here and looking ahead. The state has released a summary of research through the NC toolkit that we'll share, that's been pushed out, that we've been asked to share with our community. We'll touch on Governor Cooper's press conference last week with the State Board Chair, Superintendent Truitt, and those recommendations. We'll touch on Senate Bill 37 that could be coming to public schools across North Carolina rather quickly. Revisit some quarantine guidelines and updates. Ms. Parker is going to review our Dare County Schools survey and feedback that we've gotten from parents, guardians, and staff. We'll get to our recommended plan and protocols, and then certainly open up for discussion and questions. So first with an overview, and I'll move swiftly. As you know, DCS opened 2020-21 school year in remote learning. We tried to reopen schools in October 26th, and found that due to significant COVID-19 impacts on staffing, the district moved to go back to remote on November 13th, and then on 1/12 at the last meeting of the board voted to remain in remote learning through March 18th. Since that meeting, over 80% of Dare County school staff have received the first Pfizer vaccination from the health department. That number is actually higher because when we did register staff for the Dare County Clinic, we had several staff members who, for various reasons, have shared that they've gone to other counties to get a shot. So that is actually higher than the 80%. That's anecdotal, but it's feedback Ms. Kinsler received. The second clinic is scheduled for this Saturday. And we will have over 600 staff members who will get the second shot, along with members of Dare County law enforcement and members and faculty members from COA. Following the science, there needs to be a 2-week period following the second shot, and then the science is such that after that 2-week period of time is when people achieve the 95% immunity status. So that takes us to February 27th. The state has released new research on COVID-19 impacts on schools, which we'll get to in a moment. Since the last meeting, the governor strongly recommended, not mandated, but strongly recommended, public schools provide in-person instruction following state Plan A and Plan B protocols. And there's legislation that's been introduced that could result in North Carolina public schools being required to open, which we'll get to. So the highlight of some of the research that's been shared at the state level that's been pushed out is through the Strong Schools NC Toolkit. And we're going to cover what we've been asked to share, which is 4 different areas in the research on what we're learning about children and COVID-19. There is a little bit of a caveat in the research. Mr. Schwartz, would you like to kind of cover that?
Some of the research studies that have been relied upon are, for example, one from Wisconsin, one from North Carolina, are based on schools that agreed to be in the research project. And a number of those schools had the wherewithal and the ability to do the social distancing that would be required or expected, and improve ventilation systems and have PPE in place. So I think it's important to keep in mind that a lot of these studies are based on schools that had the ability to put all of that in place when you're making a decision whether or not to do that here.
Okay. So first, the summary provided by the state. Children appear to be less likely to acquire and spread COVID-19 than adults. Children, particularly younger children, appear less likely than adults to become infected with COVID-19, even after being exposed to someone with COVID-19. Young children can spread the virus. However, children under 14 years of age may be less likely to spread COVID-19 to others when compared with older teens and adults. Newer findings suggest that younger children may be more likely to get COVID-19 from an adult than to spread infection to adults. Spread of COVID-19 is much more likely within a household than not within a household. Example, schools. Second finding, most children have very mild illness, but while rare, some children can develop severe symptoms. We are learning more about children who are at higher risk for severe illness. Children infected with COVID-19 generally have mild or no symptoms. Although rare, children can have severe disease. Those with underlying medical conditions are at increased risk of severe illness from COVID-19. Our African American and Latinx communities and children are disproportionately affected by COVID-19. Next finding, with prevention measures in place, increasing evidence shows or suggests lower rates of COVID-19 transmission in school settings, even with high rates of community transmission. Little evidence that schools have contributed to increased rates of community transition. Countries that have reopened their schools do not see large rises in infection at a population level. Overall, studies in the U.S. and internationally have demonstrated limited disease transmission from child to child and very limited to no transition from child to adult in the in-person school setting. North Carolina's ABC Collaborative found rates of secondary transmission during in-person school instruction significantly less than the surrounding communities, and no cases of student-to-staff transmission. And the last overall finding, preventive measures are important to success of in-person learning. School systems that had high rates of face covering and other preventive measures showed low rates of transmission. Lower rates of transmission in schools and the community suggests schools can be a protective environment because of monitoring and adherence to prevention measures. Higher rates of spread of virus have been seen in out-of-school social gatherings and sports. We've certainly seen that locally. Mask use and hand hygiene remain critical prevention measures, and the CDC recommends 6 feet of social distancing as the most health protective distancing, but where that is not possible, 3 feet or greater of social distancing may still reduce the risk of spread. On February 2nd, Governor Cooper held a press conference that I'm sure everyone is aware of and or listened to. Prior to that press conference, The governor sent superintendents and school boards across the state a letter. I'll hit some of the highlights of that letter, and this was co-authored by the state board chair, Mandy Cohen with the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Governor Cooper, and Catherine Truitt, who's the new North Carolina Superintendent of Schools. And I quote, "We write today to strongly recommend that all public schools provide in-person instruction using the safety protocols outlined in the North Carolina Strong Schools Toolkit. Research has shown that these protocols are working. In-person learning is fundamental to children's development and well-being. Our public schools provide academic guidance, social and emotional supports, reliable meals, and opportunities for physical activity. Further, there are growing harms to children who are relying solely on remote instruction, including negative impacts on academic and mental health and food insecurity." Since August, at least 90 of our state's 115 school districts have safely provided in-person instruction for some of all their students. Dare County Schools is one of the 90. If you parcel out that information, that means that school districts have had students in their buildings at least one day in person since the beginning of the school year. That equates to 48% of the state's public school student population attending school as of November 23rd. So that data does go back a little bit, but you can see that that almost half the students across the state at some point have had some level of in-person learning, and that could be as little as one day a week, depending upon the model. Even with thousands of students and teachers attending school in person across the state, the N.C.G.S. has seen few COVID-19 clusters in our public schools. So, one thing that you can see on this particular slide that is important, although the governor and the associated bodies are strongly recommending that schools reopen, we still have to follow the protocols, okay? And I think one thing that's got a little lost in messaging is Plan B for 6/12 is still in place. So Plan B requires that you have to mandate and require 6 foot of social distancing in your classrooms, which means that if Dare County Schools reopens, we're back to a hybrid model with 50% density in a school. And they've used that mark at certain points of time, but you can't socially distance a middle or high school classroom of 20, 25, 27 students, 6 foot. So we still, if we reopen, 6/12 needs to remain following the Plan B guidelines.
Can I ask you a question? Mary Ellen
Yes.
Balance. So you said that how many counties are currently, or how many districts are currently offering some face-to-face?
Not currently, but through the school
school year
year,
has.
90 of 115 school districts had at least one day where there was in-person learning.
And Dare County's included in that?
Yes,
And that's what the governor reported?
yes,
Okay.
yes. So, the governor referenced Senate Bill 37, or that there was legislation that's been introduced, and there's been 2 reads in the Senate on Senate Bill 37, and I believe today was third.
It's on the calendar. Richard Schwartz is on the calendar for today in the Senate for third read.
Okay. This is very relevant to the conversation and the decision-making, so just as kind of hitting the highlights of what this bill could be, and bills can change, and it still would have to pass through the House, but currently the bill would require all schools to offer all students in grades K-12 an option for in-person instruction for the remainder of the school year through either the current Plan A or Plan B is defined in the state protocols. It would also mandate that all students with individualized learning plans, i.e. IEPs or 504 plans in K-12, be provided an option for in-person instruction through Plan A. These mandated levels of in-person instruction would be required the first weekday through 15 days after the bill becomes law, if that ultimately occurs. So if this passes, there'll be a 15-day mark where it then becomes law and the requirements are in place for public schools. The bill would also allow local districts to close individual classrooms or schools due to insufficient personnel or required student quarantines related to COVID-19 exposure, and those closures would need to be reported to DPI within 72 hours. The plan that and the recommendation that we will make tonight does meet all those requirements if that were to become law. Is a way of review. We've talked a lot in these settings, and of course been a lightning rod in the community, talking about quarantine. We covered this in our last board meeting, but as a way of review, in December, the quarantine guidelines did change. It was announced the changes in quarantine guidelines based on data indicating that about 98% of persons will develop illness within 10 days of being exposed. The following three options were then communicated to as close contacts were identified beginning in December. 14 days of quarantine with or without symptoms is still recommended. 10 days of quarantine can be completed with no symptoms or no testing, and 7 days of quarantine with no symptoms reported and a negative test result. So as you can see to the right of each of these bullet points, I gave examples. So at the elementary school, because students will not be socially distanced by 6 feet, they would have to be quarantined for the 14-day mark, okay? Whereas students if we return, students in 6-12, because they would be socially distanced, they would only have to be quarantined for 10 days and would be in that category. Staff would be quarantined for 7 days if they had no symptoms and a negative test. Now, what's also important in the messaging, even though, and this isn't John Farley, this is scientists, researchers, the state health department, even when someone is vaccinated, they still have to quarantine. Even when someone is vaccinated, they still have to quarantine. But what's working in our favor, should we return to schools, is that staff are likely to fall under the 7 days with no symptoms, and then they would test, and then they could return. That takes half of the time that staff previously were having to quarantine back when we opened up in the fall, okay? We have talked with our health department, who's talked with some local providers, thank you, Ms. Kinzel, who have said that they would make it a priority for any Dare County school staff to get tested. And I think in the most part, we've been very affluent as a community in getting tested and done quickly. So we have an understanding if a staff member had to be tested to meet that timeline, that it can be done in a fast manner.
What about cost, Mary Ellen Balance, what about cost to the staff member?
Right. Sandy, would you like to touch on
And
that?
cost to the staff member as well as leave. I know you've talked about leave in
That's
the
okay.
past.
Sandy Kinzel. As regarding the cost of the testing, if someone has been identified as a staff member, being identified as a close contact in a classroom, depending on where they go. All right, so if they go to be tested at the testing site, for example, across from the hospital, they can go in and there's no cost. They have to bring in their insurance and there's no additional cost involved at all. My understanding is they can be tested multiple times and still there's no cost involved if you go to that place. If staff members choose to go to an urgent care facility, that's a convenience facility. So there is no charge per se for the vaccine, but there is up to like a $30, $30 to $50 that would be added on for the convenience of being, tested at an urgent care. So that would not be covered by insurance and would have to come out of pocket. So we would encourage everyone to, go to the actual testing site. As far as the second question you had regarding leave, we have talked extensively at the regional level and even from the state about the contagious disease leave policy that is available for us to use. And we are very fortunate in Dare County that we have such a close, positive working relationship with our Health and Human Services Department. Because of that, we get it's not broadly publicized, but we have a system of electronic tracking where information is shared with us regarding students and staff if they are either tested positive or are identified as a close contact, so that we can immediately monitor the quarantine period. When that happens, just prior to, staff are notified to work from home if they have to be quarantined, and if they're able to work from home, that works. But for example, a maintenance worker can't take his work home. So in his case, he would put in leave, sick leave, and then at the end of the time period, payroll clerk and I work together, payroll supervisor, Emily Santora, who's fantastic. She and I work together, and we pull out those names, and we then administer the special code for that absence if it's associated with a quarantine that came to us from our health department. And when that takes place, then the leave comes off of the books for the employee, and it is charged to the special code for which we were given from the state. So it's a pretty clean
So it
process.
won't count against them?
It does not. Mm-mm.
Do you
But
know-
again, it must come to us through the health department in order to qualify.
Do you know if if the clinic in Avon is offering testing for staff? Or would a Hatteras Island staff have to drive up?
No, I'm pretty certain that there are some testing sites down there, but we can check into that, and we will. We've made contact with, our colleagues over in the Health and Human Service Department that are specifically designing clinics to make sure testing can be done efficiently, and they're even talking about changing some of the hours to be able to better accommodate some of our staff. So we'll find that information out, and I'm certain that we'll be able to meet the needs.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Dr. The question, if you're a teacher at the elementary level compared to the quarantine, is that the same amount of time?
Right, go ahead.
I thought I just did.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Mr. Twitty, this is Sandy Kinsel. If you didn't hear what I just said, I think what I hear you asking is when Dr. Farley mentioned about the 14-day quarantine being an example of a 14-day being recommended and applied to the elementary school, that would be for students because of the social distancing that we're not required to provide in those classrooms, and therefore it may be a 14-day quarantine for students. The 10 days would most likely, providing there's no symptoms, would most likely apply to our middle school and high school, but the 7 days we're specifically talking about applying to our staff members, although 7 days could be a quarantine period for a student if they meet those specific requirements.
So no matter what grade you teach, you're going to be possibly quarantined for 14 days, whether elementary is less than secondary. Possibly.
I'm not sure.
Repeat the question, please.
Yes, please repeat.
David, repeat the question, please.
Sorry, he's
I was
breaking up.
wondering does it matter what grade level you're teaching to be quarantined as a teacher or staff member?
No.
You know, TA or a teacher, cafeteria, custodian, whatever it may be, if it's in elementary, because they're less likely to get
Right.
the virus that way.
Right.
Is it still going to be across the board being quarantined for elementary or secondary level?
The grade level of the staff member is not going to come into play because primarily we can direct our staff to be able to go get a test after 7 days, or to be quarantined and tested if they have no symptoms, and be able to limit their quarantine. We have a little bit of control over that.
Okay.
Does that
But-
make sense?
And David, also, Mary Ellen Balance, it depends on the ability to social distance. So the likelihood of a high school teacher having to quarantine is lower than the possibility of an elementary teacher because of the social distance. Am I right?
And that's the reason I was at. Was there a different guidelines with that?
No, it would be the same guidelines. It would just be,
The
Rich, you wanna?
The environment's different.
Okay.
This just in, Avon Medical provides COVID testing for established patients.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila.
Rich has something. Rich, he wants to add something. Hang on.
Couple of things. One is on the contagious disease leave. There's no deduction for the sub if it's a teacher who would require a sub. And the sub is paid out of the same source of funding as the teacher. So that's a unique feature of the contagious disease leave. The other thing is on Senate Bill 37, it passed the Senate today. There was an amendment to update the reference to the Safe Schools Toolkit to the current version of it.
Okay. Mr. Hester?
Yes, Dr. Farley, Frank Hester here. I think there's one thing that's missing from that, if my memory holds correct. There's also a scenario where if a person did test positive for COVID and they have recovered, if I'm not mistaken, that person is treated differently as far as quarantining.
That's a great question. This is Sandy Kinsel. Mr. Hester, in all of my workings, that's not come up specifically through the health department.
We talked about it at the last meeting. And
I think Sheila said that maybe we just need to Mary Ellen Balance. I think maybe we just need to verify the information, but it was my understanding that if you had tested through the health department and had been positive, that you would not have to quarantine within 90 days. If it's been 6 months and you had it 6 months ago, you would have to quarantine, but that was my understanding.
As long as you didn't exhibit any of the symptoms.
Any symptoms.
That was the other part.
Right.
But I'm just saying, I think there's another caveat
Yes.
to that, but that's a little short window.
And we'll clarify that.
Caveat was they still have to do the 14-day quarantine.
That's not what I understood.
I'll have to go back and look. It's just something, I just remember that something was different about that scenario, but that
In
was
the
my
scenario where
recollection.
someone was already a positive.
That's correct. Someone had already had it, and as long as they didn't establish any new symptoms, then they did not have to quarantine.
Okay.
But that's my recollection.
We can clarify that. Back to before we talked about some of the
I have an update.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Information I'm receiving is that if you've tested positive, you do not have to re-quarantine for 90 days from a positive test. So thank you, Mr. Hester, and thank you again, Sheila.
Okay. So the reason...
Phone a friend.
Thank you. Wait, Johnny on the spot. Sandy Kinsel on her phone. Thank you. The scientific reason that someone who's vaccinated still has to quarantine, because it's not been proved out if someone who's vaccinated could still be an asymptomatic carrier. So that's likely to change in the future, but that's the reason why if you're vaccinated, you still have to quarantine. The other thing is, a lot of these scenarios are all situation specific, okay? But I think part of the messaging is we intend, with 85+% of our staff members who've been quarantined, we're in a much better position for many, if not all those staff, if they have to be in position to 7 days and then test. So this is progress in terms of staff sustainability and concerns we've previously. Is there another update, Rich? Okay. All right, let's keep it moving. The next chart is for the public. We went through this in the December meeting. I'm not going to go through all this because we previously covered it, but it provides the number of staff and student COVID cases since December 11th. What's more important is the next chart. This chart demonstrates the number of current staff and students who are out either due to being identified in contact tracing or is a laboratory confirmed positive case. Only 12 staff members. If you recall, back in November, we shut down November 13th, it was about 100 and 59 students. So that is way down. Obviously, if we reopen up schools, numbers are going to change, but that is a much more positive array of data than what we presented in the last board meeting, as you see the December totals. Next, we're going to shift gears. We have at certain points in time during the pandemic gotten feedback, which we value, from our parents, our guardians, and our staff. And Ms. Parker is going to go through the responses that we've gotten back in our latest survey process. Johanna?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and the Dare County community. I'm going to quickly go through just the February 2021 survey overview. We are just going through the information around reopening. All right, so just so everybody knows, as we go through, anything relating to staff is going to be in blue, parents and guardians is in orange, just as you're looking at the graphs. With DCS staff, total responses to our survey was 504. Our total staff as of the last payroll period was 817. That's a 62% completion rate. That's usually around what we see. With DCS parents and guardians, the total responses is just a little over 1,700, and then it's actually higher than our fall 2020, our reopening survey then, a little higher, which I was kind of surprised by. Then total students enrolled is 5,200. We didn't do a comparison with percentages for that because number of students and number of families, it's apples to oranges. All right, so with school percent response, really this is based on how large the school is. So the larger the school, the higher response, because there's more students and parents that go there. Really, responses were very similar across the board. Larger schools had more response. All right, so the staff survey. This survey went out to all of our staff members, so bus drivers, school nutrition staff, receptionists, everybody. Even if they don't have a instructional role, they still got the survey. So 398 certified staff, 106 classified, and then top responders just across positions. Teachers, obviously, because we have more teachers than anything else in the district, administrators, teacher assistants, and our school counselors. All right, so teaching preferences. We purposefully did not talk about like option 1 or option 2 or get really specific. We just wanted to see where's the energy around. So in the survey, virtual learning on this section is yellow. Blue is face-to-face, and then hybrid is red. In hybrid, the description for that was just a combination of face-to-face and remote. The first graph on the far left is everybody, pre-K-12 instructional staff only. So earlier, how I shared that everybody could take the survey. This data that I'm showing right here is only people that are instructional staff that would be directly with groups of kids, if that makes sense. The hybrid, we're at 30% district-wide, virtual right at 29.9, right at 30, and then face-to-face almost 40% at 39.8 for everybody. The top right graph is just pre-K-5 instructional staff. So those are just teachers and teacher assistants that are assigned to pre-K-5 classrooms. We broke it down this way because we were curious if it was different, because the models could be different for them. With face-to-face, we're almost at 50% in blue for pre-K-5 instructional staff, virtual learning right at 25%, and then hybrid, a combination at 26%. Then the bottom right is just 612 instructional staff. One caveat here, if someone teaches, I know teachers listening are like, but I'm in both. I work in both. You're in both. We kept them in both options. So if they work across K-12, their data's in both. So nothing's skewed. Face-to-face, 33%. It's like a a perfect pie almost, with 612, hybrid 28.6, and virtual learning 37.8. So really, really close numbers there. And then just keep in mind, something that could skew the 612 information is that 612 can only return on Plan B according to North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services and DPI. So some people may have chosen hybrid because they know that's the only way they can come back face-to-face right now. All right, so this was just another way to ask the same question. The first graph at the top is I prefer to teach on-site in person. 1 for all of these is strongly disagree, and 5 is strongly agree. So with staff, we're really spread. Almost 40% is on 5, strongly agree they prefer to teach on-site in person, and then divided over. One thing to remember with 3 is neutral. That's maybe not sure or don't really have feelings either way. Just important to keep in mind as we're going through. The next one is having an asynchronous day for planning and meetings is important to me. 1, like I said before, is strongly disagree, 5 being strongly agree. You can see clearly there's a lot of energy in teacher world around having that. At 55, almost getting close to 60 or almost 70 if you include both 4 and 5. All right, so now we're gonna switch to parent guardian. And there are some of these where the questions were the same, so I'm gonna show you both graphs together just because that's helpful. Parents and guardians, 96% parents, 2% grandparents, 2% guardians. How many children do you have enrolled in DCS? We did have families do this once, 1 survey per family, because if you have 4 kids, you don't want to do the survey 4 times. And it's just helpful for us to get a holistic view. Almost half the district is 1 child in blue, 37.5%, 2 children, 3 children, almost 10%, 4, I'm not sure exactly what that is, and then there's little tiny that are more than that. Spanish dual language immersion families are 17.7% of the whole, and that's 302 families district-wide that did the survey. All right, parent preferences. So learning option preferences for parents. I intend for my children to participate in the following option. Red is return to school face-to-face. Their family is interested in returning to school on-site in some fashion this year. So we worded it that way on purpose, not asking about specific models, not get into the weeds, just in general, where's your family at? Virtual learning, not interested in face-to-face instruction in any form this school year. So not interested in coming in buildings. That's right at 20%, and then our family is unsure right now. That's at 15.8. Put that in there just because that's helpful for us to kind of know where people are at. All right, parent and guardian learning option preferences. So this is breaking it down pre-K 5 and then 6-12. Because this is a family survey, remember they did it once. So if people had children in both, they are in both graphs. Does that make sense? Red on these charts is return to school. Blue is virtual, and yellow is unsure. In the pre-K 5 world, almost 70% of families want their child to return to school in some way. Virtual at 16.2, and then unsure at 14.2. High school, middle school, high school, 6-12 secondary, little different. Return to school almost at 60%. Virtual at 23.8, and then unsure at 16.7. So similar, but there's definitely higher percentage for returning pre-K 5. All right. This is a question we just asked parents. I want my child or children to be on site in the school building for as many days as possible. 1 strongly agree, 5 strongly disagree, 5 strongly agree. Lots of energy around as many days as possible. Right up there at over 70% if you put 4 and 5 together. Then these 2 questions we also only asked families. I believe it's important to prioritize our youngest learners, pre-K-5, returning to face-to-face instruction. We ask that just because that is what is out there in a lot of messaging. And districts that phased in pre-K-5, that was what those communities wanted, so we were just curious, where are people at? We're got a pretty good amount neutral there, but there is a high percentage for strongly agree with that one. I believe all students pre-K-12 should return face-to-face at the same time, so everybody returns at once. We got some neutral and then quite a bit for strongly agree. All right, so the next two are questions that staff got and parents got. Same question, just to kind of see where we're at. Staff is blue, parents are orange. Maintaining social distancing in the school setting is important to me. With staff at 60, almost 63%, strongly agree with that statement. Really probably inching up on over 70 with 4 and 5 together. Maintaining social distancing in the school setting is important to me with parents. There's more neutral here. One of interpretation that we had with this is that there are families that may not be concerned about it and just want their children to be in the building as much as possible. So maybe they're not as concerned about social distancing. Really just depends. But it's just interesting for y'all to see. Then staff and parents, with classrooms being at a lower capacity is important to me. So just another way to ask this. Staff is blue, parents are orange. This one is different. Staff, we are pushing 75% really with it being at a lower capacity. This could be interpreted as having smaller class sizes is important to me, which would probably be 4 or 5 even if we weren't in the situation. Then classrooms being a lower capacity with parents, there is more, really almost the same between neutral and strongly agree, which is interesting. That leads us to believe in some ways that we have more pre-K-5 families in general in the district, and that maybe what that could mean is that coming back on Plan A, where there is not capacity restrictions, is something that families aren't as concerned about. So different ways you could interpret it.
Okay. Questions for Johanna?
Thank you for putting that together. It's interesting information, especially compared with the teacher and the family responses.
Okay, so next we're going to go to our recommendation to the board. So what we're proposing is pre-K-5, return to school on March 1st. That meets our timeline that we shared tonight with the second shot, the 2 weeks immunity period. We're recommending that pre-K-5 return 4 days a week, face-to-face, and that 6-12 is on a 2-day face-to-face hybrid, also starting March 1st. Pre-K-5 would attend 4 days a week. Students attend Monday through Thursday each week. Friday is an asynchronous learning day for all. Why would we need an asynchronous day?
Can you
Go ahead.
Can you explain what asynchronous means to parents at home? Like what
Yes.
they would be responsible for at home?
Yes, asynchronous means that there's no live instruction going on, and there could be a combination of instructional delivery between a platform where students can go and access their assignments and or recorded lessons, but there's no live delivery of instruction, okay? Many, as you know, in the last meeting that we had with the board, Johanna, our Director of Innovation, has spoken to several districts who were able to stay open. Several, and this is reiterating information we talked about previously, several districts who've been able to stay open for an extended period of time did so because they did not try to educate their entire K-12 student body face-to-face. Many school districts who did stay open put in adult contact protocols. If you recall, we talked about low, medium, and high in the last Board of Education meeting and covered those, and we'll get to those in a moment. And so our goal needs to be, we need to get kids back in school, and we need to be able to sustain staffing through the rest of the school year. And we know our schools are safe. Our messaging, even when we've closed, is the school setting is a safe place, but we're not able to sustain our staffing pattern, okay? With the protocols we're gonna recommend tonight, we are asking our teachers to not have planning time. There's a general statute, 115C 3011, that has to do with duty-free instructional time. The average Dare County teacher on a daily basis has about 45 minutes, depending upon the role and responsibilities of planning. And we are, with the pods that we're gonna set up in the restrictive congregation of adults, teachers Monday through Thursday would not have planning time, thus the need to do that on Friday, okay? In 612, we're recommending 2 days a week, also a hybrid. So this is a similar, although a little bit different from what we implemented previously. Keep in mind again, 612 has the 6-foot social distancing requirements in Plan B. And we would have, instead of cohorts on Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, we're recommending a cohort that attends Monday and Tuesday, and a cohort that attends on Wednesday and Thursday, and Friday is the asynchronous day. And we've gone back and forth about, depending upon the level, a plus delta on the asynchronous day. We think if everyone is on the same day, it's better for families with planning. And if you have an older student who might supervise younger children, it makes sense to have them home on the same day, okay? The immediate family members, we'll be customer friendly on this as far as the cohorts go. Sometimes we have family members who have 2 different last names. Half the alphabet goes Monday, Tuesday, the other Wednesday, Thursday. We will make those accommodations as needed if families let us know they have a need. We intend to alter our custodial schedules on Tuesdays. So we'll have custodians who work deeper into the night so that they can sanitize. We'll also do that on Fridays. So the cohorts have been in for 48 hours, then we're sanitizing the building again, and we're doing it on Friday evening. We also, with the asynchronous day, it's helpful with potential quarantine timelines. So an example, when someone is a laboratory confirmed positive, let's say in an example, someone is positive on a Wednesday. You have to go back 48 hours for the contagious period to identify students or adults that person came in contact with. If the same cohort goes 2 days in a row, you're cutting down potentially on the number of kids who may have to be quarantined, okay? Pardon? You have to go back 48 hours to identify who that person may come in contact with. So when you have the same cohort in the school for 2 consecutive days, it cuts down on the number of others who may have to be quarantined. We're trying to mitigate the number of adults who are being quarantined. We're trying to sustain the program, okay? We also looked at the school calendar for the rest of the year, and by not going on Fridays, it balances the instructional time that we would have missed on some Fridays, as days and time is precious. Underneath this stanza, you can see considerations for students with disabilities. Services are defined by remote learning contingency plans and IEPs. Contingency plans apply on remote learning days, and IEPs apply on face-to-face days. Students on the extended content standards, who we've been serving in separate setting classrooms, have the opportunity to participate 4 days a week, with Friday being the asynchronous off-site day. So that's the one change, because we've been going from 8 to 1:30 with students in the extended content standards, and they'll go a full day now, Monday through Thursday. With staff pods, and keeping all these restrictions that we're going to share here in a moment, it gives us an opportunity to possibly not have to shut down an entire school, okay? So that also brings down the potential for the number of staff who have to be quarantined. Also want to note that it's possible if the General Assembly mandates the return to school in Senate Bill 37, it's possible that districts may have to offer K-12 students who have a 504 or an IEP, a full school week, or in this case, 4 days under our plan. So it is possible, if that language is written into that bill eventually, if you have a student in 612 who has an IEP or a 504, we may have to offer 4 days a week instruction. So that's possible that could shift. Okay, but that's not law, and we don't know if that's going to be law. That's in the summary of possibilities, and as Mr. Schwartz has indicated, that bill's moving quickly. Okay. Virtual learning is still an option. It's mandated by the state. Virtual learning is an option for all students K-12 for the remainder of the school year. K-5 virtual learning stays in place for K-5 students currently assigned to that option. If parents want to change their status to face-to-face, we need to move in a somewhat swiftly manner, and we're going to give everyone a week to go to their school if they want to switch out. Okay, so that's a fair amount of time, and we've got a lot of scheduling that we need to do, and so that's the 1 week timeline. Students who are in the Spanish dual language immersion K3 program currently, students who opt into virtual learning will be assigned to district-wide virtual DLI classrooms based on program model and grade level. This model will allow for more individualized attention from staff in both the face-to-face and virtual programs. The DLI virtual option will be in place for the remainder of the school year. There's no guarantee virtual students will remain assigned to their current teacher. And Johanna, do you want to touch on that briefly?
The lights are on. Okay, there we go.
There you go.
This is Johanna Parker. Just to clarify this for the board and families listening, in the fall when we returned face-to-face, the dual language immersion teachers were the only teachers in elementary that taught synchronously, which meant that they, in some cases, had 20 students in front of them, teaching them face-to-face, and then they had 3 to 5 students virtually on a Google Meet coming into the classroom. That model really honestly was not sustainable, but at the time that was the only choice that we had. But in January, we were able to fill 2 vacancies with co-teachers that will help with the virtual option. So we're able to, we have a little more creativity with staffing so that we are able to offer like a more virtual experience for our immersion students. Our staff, the immersion teachers that are listening to this, English and Spanish languages, they really have done an amazing job. But after working together with them and then feedback from families, we really want to give the teachers and the students that are in virtual a full virtual experience, and then give the face-to-face students the full attention of their teacher.
Dr. Parker, Frank Hester, just a quick question. That was directed towards Spanish immersion. Is that different if with the regular students?
We have a technical problem here. We'll get fixed in a moment.
Sorry. So Mr. Hester, can you say your question one more time?
My question was, the description that you gave dealt with Spanish immersion, but that won't be the case with the kids in regular classes.
Yes, so students in K-5 were shuffled and assigned to virtual teachers only. So if they opted in for virtual, we did face-to-face in the fall, they stayed assigned to those virtual teachers throughout remote. So students and staff that are teaching in that mode, that would stay the same. That's why up top, if families that are in the virtual option right now, if they want to switch, they would need to go to their data manager to do that, because we know who those students are because their teacher assignment changed. They're in the virtual 3rd grade class that has students in it in 3rd grade from all over the county that one teacher teaches. Does that make sense? Virtual?
Yes, and what I'm trying to get to, if I'm understanding it correctly, that if you had a child that was doing virtual and they switched to face-to-face, then the teacher that's doing face-to-face is not going to be the same teacher that's doing virtual. So there's going to be a change.
Potentially.
Yes.
Potentially. Just the thing I want to make sure is really clear, and all families that have a child in the immersion program will get an email from me tomorrow that is explaining this again. But there is not a guarantee that if the teacher that your child's currently assigned to during remote learning, there's not a guarantee that if you choose virtual, that teacher will remain the same.
Okay. 612 students back to virtual. 612 students remaining virtual will remain assigned to their current teachers and participate in synchronous, asynchronous instruction. Students will participate in live weekly Google Meet sessions. Students who are enrolled in the virtual learning program, we're understanding that we're having a commitment for the remainder of the school year. There's a lot of scheduling considerations, which we've talked about previously, with going back and forth. But certainly, part of my message is, in general, we're in a temporary place in time right now, okay? Back to our goal. Our goal needs to be to open up and sustain. What I'm recommending to the board is that we open with this model. If we put all these protocols that we're going to put in place, we believe that we can sustain our staffing pattern and keep our schools open, okay? We feel like we should take the next 6 weeks or so, from March 1st to spring break, see what our staffing pattern looks like. We can reassess. It's possible that the restrictions open up even more as we move through time, and maybe we come to the April Board of Education meeting, April 13th, and we recommend that the 5th day open up, or that we consider, and if we did do that, then we would have to scale back on these contact restrictions from staff. And we're asking staff to do a lot, okay? So I just think we've got to, our goal needs to be get schools open and to keep them open, okay? If we look at the protocols that we want to put in place, and again, a lot of this is lesson learns from schools that have been able to stay open, and we presented different options in our last meeting. We want to go to the most restrictive, which means that it's the lowest amount of contact so that the adults don't congregate. And we know through experience, every time that we had an adult who's going to be quarantined and contact tracing then developed, there was typically 4 or 5 or 6 others who were right behind them because they were eating lunch together or they were planning together. We can't control social behavior outside of the school setting, but we can control congregating on school facilities and campuses, okay? So these are all reasons why we can maintain staffing, keep our schools open, and also on the staff side, a need for the asynchronous day. So for DCS staff, no face-to-face meetings of school staff. Our professional learning communities and staff meetings are held virtually. No congregation of adults in the building or outside. Parent conferences could be face-to-face, but we've certainly moved to a lot of virtual conferences, which certainly, if there's high need to make an appointment with the principal, we're trying to cut down on the number of visitors to schools. IEP meetings may not necessarily always be virtual, but we're trying to, the best of our ability, cut down on adult interaction face-to-face. Specialists, ESL, AIG, interventionists meet with students virtually, even if the same building. Students remain in their home-based classroom with a device and headphones to receive services. EC services will follow the student's IEP and/or contingency plans and conduct services virtually as appropriate. So that's dependent upon a student's needs who may have an IEP. Staff pods is something that we're stressing. So assigned designated staff members provide coverage for individual classrooms. Staff will be assigned spaces within the building for planning and eating. So staff members will not congregate in the staff lounge to eat. They will be asked to eat in their classrooms or in separate spaces, and we're going to do the best we can to try to assign adults so that there's not overlap. Again, we don't want to have to do this, but we're trying to reopen our schools and we're trying to keep our schools open. Departmentalized and specials related art classes are taught virtually at the elementary level. Departmentalized teachers deliver instruction virtually, or home-based teachers deliver all subjects. We do have some schools, for example, where they're departmentalized in 5th grade, and the English teacher is piping in virtually to the students in the other 2 classrooms. So that's an example of the departmentalized option. Specials and related arts teachers deliver virtual instruction virtually, except PE classes can go outside, weather permitting. Lunch, if students eat in the cafeteria, the adults that provide supervision must remain distanced by at least 10 feet. So part of our messaging with our staff is going to be, where we can, let's go beyond the 6 feet, okay? 8, 10 feet, if possible. You know, some of the, we talked through all these different scenarios. If it, you know, typically adults in the cafeteria would congregate and eat lunch at a table. If we can eliminate and mitigate the amount of interaction with adults and spread them out, it's not preferred for communication and so on, then we're going to be able to mitigate the number of staff who come in contact with each other and may have to be quarantined. For students, moving to the next slide. Under Plan B, secondary 612 students move from class to class. It's impossible to keep 612 students in the same classroom all day. You just can't do it, okay? They've got different classes they're taking, kids go in different directions. It's impossible. You can't achieve that. So we can't have 612 in the same classroom all day. At lunch, students eat lunch socially distanced in the cafeteria or in a classroom is determined by the principal. Each school's got a little bit of a different wrinkle based upon the size of their school. As far as lunch procedures go, if students do eat in the cafeteria, the adults that provide supervision must remain distanced by at least 10 feet. Under Plan A, elementary pre-K 5 students remain in their home-based classroom. For lunch, students eat lunch socially distanced in the cafeteria and the classroom is determined by the principal. If students do eat in the cafeteria, the adults that provide supervision must remain distanced by at least 10 feet. If we maintain that kind of distancing, they're not going to be identified in contact tracing. At recess, masks are not required to be worn at recess unless 6-foot social distancing cannot be maintained. This is changed by the state. They've strengthened the language around mask use during recess. Recess times will be staggered throughout the day to ensure classroom pods are not intermixed. And there's a reference to the cloth face coverings section that's been updated as of February 2nd. Our principals are advocates for kids to be able to get outside and have a mask break and get their masks off. Where that, based upon new guidelines, if we've got kids who say maybe are playing touch football or in a soccer game, the recommendation from the state is to wear masks, so that could surface. There's some flexibility there. What we're trying to emphasize is let's stagger recess times so that there may be a class of 20 kids and not the 3rd grade with 60 at one time. And then also with the adults, a lot of times adults who are doing playground supervision might congregate and we're trying to separate them. So common sense outside at some point kicks in. Let me reiterate the 612 language that we're seeing in Senate Bill 37, okay? We cannot currently today, 612 has to be exclusively under Plan B with the social distancing and with a hybrid model. We can't make a decision to serve kids with IEPs or 504s in the 612 program right now. Thus, the recommendation for the hybrid. If the bill passes and there is an option for parents 612 to have their students served the full 4 days, then we'll have to make an adjustment. Presently, we cannot do that. So that may be coming, and that may be coming quickly, and that's going to shift scheduling and staffing for us, and that's something that we're going to have to tackle. But as of today, we cannot independently make that determination, okay? Again, I'll stress, I think it's important for us we're asking a lot of staff out of our staff members. We've got 612 was teaching both ways, synchronously, asynchronously, face-to-face. We've got all these restrictive protocols, and there is high need for us for that asynchronous day for our teachers and everything that we're asking them to do of it. We could, again, always reassess, and I do think it's smart for us to give it a trial period, 6 weeks, get to spring break, reassess, and we can always ease up on the pedal. But it'd be very hard to go back and put all these restrictions in place if we're starting. We want to be successful. We want to keep our schools open. Okay, so I'd be happy to take questions, comments, discussion.
Margaret Lawler, in 6 through 12, cohort A would go Monday, Tuesday,
Yes,
and then B would go Wednesday, Thursday. The teachers and staff are still responsible for the kids that are not there that day, providing them
correct.
with education too.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Similar model to what we did in the fall, and it's not perfect. We've got a combination dependent upon the class of asynchronous or synchronous instruction based upon the classroom, the class, particularly at the high school. The other thing I'll say is, we've got 2,500 K2 parents wondering about their devices, and are those going to school with kids? We've talked through those scenarios. K2 devices will stay home. We don't want little ones going back and forth with devices. 3-5, we do have carrying cases that we can, pardon?
You mean K2 will stay in school?
No, just as devices. I'm just talking devices right now.
Right.
Yeah. K2 devices will stay home.
Right.
Kids will come to school, yeah.
Right.
Mr. and Mrs. Elementary parent, your kids are coming to school on March 1st. No, but the devices will stay at home. The kids can access those on Friday if necessary. The other thing that we're going to do, and this is another reason for Friday to be the async day, is for K2, teachers are going to be in a position where they could send a lot of things home to work on Friday and not solely rely on the platforms. So we probably have a lot of K2 parents that are breathing easier with that, okay? 3-5, students have a capability to bring them back and forth as needed, and we do have carrying cases for them to protect the laptops, so there's flexibility as far as the devices go.
Joe, David, you got any comments? Are you there?
This is David. No, it's a good plan, John. I really like the workout y'all provided for us tonight to make this happen in the future.
Thank you.
Dr. Farley, Frank Hester, I got 3 quick questions.
Sure.
1, are you staff for your bus drivers and extra janitorial staff to maintain this?
We're fully staffed in both departments.
Okay. And the after-school program will be in effect?
Good question. Yes, after-school program will be in effect Monday through Thursday.
Okay. And my last question is, these changes won't have any impact on sporting events that's going on now?
That's correct. The restrictions on athletics are still in place. There are many different protocols that the High School Athletic Association have applied. And the biggest impact that's aligned with the current executive order from the governor is the 25 person limit in indoor arenas such as gymnasiums and 100 at outdoor venues. I would anticipate the 100 may change at some point, but currently we still have those restrictions, which does, we have a lot of community members who are wondering, are we going to open up facilities again? And at some point, I think the board's going to have to revisit that. But currently, with these kinds of restrictions, it's almost impossible. So the same, this implementation of, if approved, of the instructional plan we're putting before the board will not change athletics at this point.
Okay, thank you. And like David, I want to say thank you for all the hard work you and your staff have done to put the building blocks in place to give us the best chance to be successful. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate it. It's a team effort, and we spend hours upon hours trying to analyze and problem solve.
Rich, I have a question about the Senate Bill 37 that's on the floor right now. In that Senate bill, does it give the local boards of education the opportunity to send 6-12 back full-time, like 4 days or 5 days?
Yes.
So we would have because right now what the governor said on Tuesday is we want you all to put everybody back in school, but then he didn't lift any of his executive orders to allow us to do that. So does the Senate bill that's on the floor right now allow the local boards to make that decision?
It would require local boards, it would require local boards to provide the option of in-person instruction under either Plan A or Plan B for all students enrolled K-12.
Would it lift the executive order that we have, where we have to maintain the 6 feet social distancing? Because that's the problem right now.
Right, it would either be, it would say either Plan A or Plan B. There are some inconsistencies between what's in the toolkit and what's in Senate Bill 37. Senate Bill 37 says local school administrative units shall comply with all requirements of the toolkit. As that guidance existed, it was changed to February 2, 2001 for implementing Plan A and Plan B that are appropriate to the plan of reopening. And then it goes on to describe the plan of reopening. And it says that you have to provide an in-person option under Plan A for anybody who's got an IEP or a 504 plan, and also provide them with a remote option. And you have to provide an option of in-person instruction under Plan A or Plan B for everybody else enrolled K-12.
But as it stands right now, the announcement he made on Tuesday was encouraging us to send kids back to school, but not giving us any kind of authority to do it outside of, because he hasn't lifted any of his executive orders. So
Right.
we're still,
But the executive orders refer to the guidance in the toolkits.
yeah.
So the toolkit needs to be altered.
Well, the toolkit has been altered. It was altered on February 2nd.
But
and
even further.
It may be altered again, I'm not sure.
If the legislation passes.
If the legislation
Right.
passes, it will likely be altered again, but,
My point mainly is that I feel like the governor is telling us one thing yet doing another, because he's encouraging us to do it, but then he's not giving us the ability to do it. So under the
Right.
plan that John has proposed,
but, I'm sorry, but Senate Bill 37
Right.
overrides the executive order.
Right,
Proposed to
that's-
override the executive
right.
order.
But currently, we don't have the option of sending 612 back full-time.
No.
No.
Not
No.
under the current executive
Right.
orders, no.
Right. So,
Madam Chair, this is
go ahead, David.
This is
Wait,
David.
you do have the option of
I'd like
sending them back full-time
make a
if
motion
you
to
could do the
reopen
social distancing.
Right.
The Dare
But you
County
don't have the
schools
ability to do the
on
social
March 1st,
distancing.
2021 as follows.
David, would you mind repeating that? Would you mind starting that motion over?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we reopen Dare County schools on March 1st, 2021 as follows. Pre-K going to school 4 days a week, with Fridays being anonymous day, and
Asynchronous.
6 through 12 going to school in 2 cohorts, Monday and Tuesdays and Wednesday and Thursdays, with Friday being the same. And the virtual school options will continue for parents who desire to keep their students at home.
This is Joe Tauber. I second that motion.
So we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Twitty and a second by Mr. Tauber. Is there any further discussion?
Point of clarification, my staff is, Dr. Farley remembers about 99% of the details, but apparently missed one. K2 devices are actually coming back to school. So Friday will be solely packets coming home. We've debated back and forth 3 or 4 different methods and ways that we're going to attack that. Thank you, directors. So just we're clear on that. That way they can use them in school, and they don't have to travel back and forth.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Twitty, a second by Mr. Tauber. Do we have any other further discussion? Okay. We will do a roll call vote.
Was that, excuse me, was that motion for pre-K-5 or K-5?
Pre-K. It's actually pre-K through
Okay,
5.
thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Carl Woody,
Yes.
David Twitty,
Yes.
Joe Tauber,
Yes.
Frank Hester,
Yes.
Susan Bothwell,
Yes.
Margaret Lawler,
Yes.
Mary Ellen Balance, yes. Before we move on, I just want to say that the amount of work, I totally understand how much, actually, I don't understand. I can only assume with the amount of stuff that we've gotten, but there's a couple groups that I think get left out that people don't realize, and the data managers that have to go back and forth and flip this all around is, a lot of work on them, and the school finance officers that are trying to keep up with all of these time cards and time schedules and who's doing this and who's going where. So Candy, to your finance staff. And I'm not sure exactly who oversees all the data managers, but we all, as the board, collectively appreciate all of our employees and how much they work hard to protect our students and staff. And so I'd just like to say thank you and look forward to seeing what Senate Bill 37 does. Okay, moving on. We have, next item is the approval of the school calendars for the 21-22 and the 22-23 school year.
So Ms. Kinzel's going to go through a presentation. We have had a couple of committees that have met and given us, we've worked with on the school calendar and given us recommendations. And I had emailed all our parents across the district, and for those that were interested in being a part of the committee, we had about 15 parents who said yes, thank you, and joined us. And we also had some students who represented each of our high schools who were on our committee. We had about 15, 18 staff members, and we're very pleased to get their input and recommendations. We came up with 4 different drafts. We got down to recommended drafts, sent them out to our parents and our staff members for feedback, and the drafts that are coming before the board tonight are our recommendations. And in Dare County Schools, we've historically approved calendars 2 years in advance for lots of planning time for folks. So, Ms. Kinzel.
Thank you, Dr. Farley. Sandy Kinzel. The presentation we're going to share with you, much of it is generated by the calendar law that went into effect in July 1st, 2013. This places a lot of restrictions on how the calendar is formatted and what options and flexibility we have in being able to insert certain days, number of days, and so forth. And that comes through every time we go through a calendar creation process. We do our best, and I think a lot of the individuals that chose to be on the committee wanted to do so they could gain a better understanding of some of the restrictions and the nuances within the calendar law. So it is a very educational process, and we thank everybody for participating. Joe, next slide, please. Just to summarize some of the calendar law provisions, we must have 215 days for teachers. That's part of their contract calendar year. Calendar law also says 185 days or 1,025 instructional hours must be verified in the calendar. A start date is no earlier than Monday closest to August 26th. The end date can be no later than Friday closest to June 11th. There must have at least 9 teacher work days, 1 additional for each day under 185. So in other words, if we go with a calendar that says 180 student days because we can make the instructional hours requirement, then there would obviously need to be 5 additional days in teacher work days to be able to compensate for that. There's a minimum of 10 annual leave days that need to be worked into the calendar, and a minimum of 2 work days where teachers can take annual leave. And then finally, the same or equivalent number of legal holidays, and Veterans Day shall be observed on the designated day. In some cases, we have the opportunity to be able to move a holiday that is set by the state and then move it into another day. That's where we're at. Over the years, there have been local preferences that have developed through these committees, and again, we try to work those into the calendar. Locally, teachers and parents like typically to have 3 to 4 work days before the start of the school year, have required work days for district professional learning being held in August, October, and February. Teachers prefer time at the end of each quarter to complete grades. They prefer to have 2 weeks off at Christmas and an extended weekend between the semesters in January. And spring break is preferred to be a full week, and it has typically fallen after Easter. A lot of this is dictated by our collaboration with COA and when they schedule their spring break. And in case, if they've set their calendar, which they have, then it's in our best interest for our students to have the same spring break so that they're not off for 2 weeks, either off from school and have no place to come, or because they're taking COA courses, or vice versa. So again, some local guidelines that there'd be no fewer than 180 days, and sometimes that is a huge challenge, as you're going to see in the 2022 calendar. That there be no one-day student weeks unless it's necessitated by a makeup day, so we're not going to build that into the calendar, but it may happen. Martin Luther King Jr. Day would be a holiday, and at least one optional work day for beginning teacher training would be scheduled in August, and finally, at least 2 required work days would be designated for district-wide training. Dr. Farley outlined our process by using the committee and the stakeholder input, and the only thing that I'll add to that is that some of the feedback that we've received through the surveying, when we surveyed staff, the latest numbers were that we had about 71% of the respondents were staff, and about 30%, well, 29% exactly, were parents. There were some reoccurring themes that came through from that larger group of feedback. A lot of it had to do with, in the 2021-22 calendar, had to do with a change that the committee had recommended, moving away from the Friday early release days or parent conference days. We felt like a lot of times it's more productive in the middle of the week because then we can, we have a better chance of getting people in, and even parents told us that a lot of times that Friday became an extended weekend and they did not really attend those conferences. And so we wanted to try a different approach these next 2 years. Other comments were made about the start date being where they were, and being a tourism industry very heavily in our area. Many people are concerned about students being available to help work summer jobs, and but again, the legislation really dictates where we start for the most part. But all other comments were relatively positive if they were made. Again, a lot of questions that came through. Some major themes that came through had to do with the start dates, and I will say that for both calendars, about where the start and end dates were, about the potential or the possible placement of the early release days for professional learning and or conferences. Late spring break was a theme that came through, and again, we're kind of locked into that if we're going to align with COA. And then just how the semesters worked out, and where, especially if we're going to be on a 4x4 at the high school, how that might impact things. So the next slide gives you just a side-by-side comparison of the calendars that have been presented to the board for approval this evening. As you'll see in 2021-22, we were able to get, because of where the 26th of August falls, we're able to kind of recoup 3 extra days and be able to have this calendar go for 183 days. Again, we're hopeful, falling on the tail end of COVID, we think those 3 extra days will maximize some instructional hours and be able to help us to be able to make up some lost learning for students that struggled during a remote learning time period. It breaks down pretty evenly in the semesters, and typically we lose days due to hurricanes, so the first semester oftentimes gets shortchanged, so if we front load, it helps for that. Plan ahead. The first semester will end on January 21st, which is typical. This calendar presented for 21-22 has 4 optional work days for teacher and 7 required work days. Has 2 full parent days for conferences, and that was something that several teachers commented, and parents alike for that matter, that they liked having those days set aside to be able to conference. So we want to keep those, but we did change the days to Wednesday. Early dismissal days were built in September, March, April, and May in this particular calendar, and oftentimes it precedes a holiday weekend, and we all know what traffic's like around here, so Fridays, that helps everyone out. The district professional learning days built into the calendar. We put a half a day in October, a full day in February, and we are going to continue to provide virtual sessions throughout the year for our staff. And then finally, spring break also is scheduled the week after. It falls late that year, but it does align with COA. 22-23 calendar, this was a struggle, to be very honest with you. It is very restrictive in terms of the start and end date. And when the start and end date is tight, in terms of making that 215 days and be able to get the leave days worked in and all of the other requirements, we had no other choice but to place work days at both ends of the calendar in order to meet the 215 days for staff contract hours, for the teacher contract hours. So there were many comments about the number of work days that were in this calendar for staff ahead of students beginning back to school. Because of the use of early release days to provide professional learning and half days to provide for the designated conference time for parents, we were able to get 180 instructional days in the calendar, but there is some lopsidedness because of where the semester falls. And it's late in January 27th. So we have in this calendar 8 optional work days, 6 required days, 2 half-day parent conferences on Wednesday again. The early dismissal days are in September, April, and May. The professional learning days are pretty much the same in October and February, keeping 1 full day. And again, spring break in this calendar also falls after Easter and aligns with COA. The copies of the calendar that the board received yesterday evening and you have in your updated packet were formatted so that they're ready to be posted once approved. We're also taking a different approach. Instead of having 2 copies of each year's calendar, one in English and one in Spanish, we've combined so that we've formatted 1 calendar so there's a less likelihood of making an error if we have to make any changes down the road. We were having to change 2 calendars, and so this kind of keeps it consolidated, and I think it'll be a clean representation on our website if approved, when approved. So with that, if you have any questions, Dr. Farley and I'd be happy to entertain.
I just want to comment that I appreciate that the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Margaret.
I'm sorry, this is Margaret Lawler. Thank you for the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. It's an optional work day, but the kids are not there. And hopefully the teachers can take advantage of that day too, to travel if they need to, or get ready for family coming. That's to me the biggest day in the calendar to get off. So,
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Lawler, for being part of the committee. Your insight's always very helpful, and we appreciate it.
I liked it better this year from all the other
It
years.
was virtual, and yes, it,
You could see all the teachers
yes.
and hear all the comments. You weren't just at a table with
Yeah.
3 other people, so.
yeah, we might keep that.
Yeah. But no lunch.
Anybody else have any questions?
Madam Chair, I move we adopt the proposed school calendar for the 21-22 and 22-23 on the first reading as requested.
I have a
Ms. Carl
motion by
Woody.
Ms. Lawler,
I'll second it.
a second by Mr. Woody. Any discussion? Okay, Carl Woody? Yay or nay?
Yay.
David Twitty? David?
Yes.
Joe Tauber?
Yes.
Frank Hester?
Yes.
Susan Bothwell? Margaret Lawler?
Yes.
And Mary Ellen Balance, yes. Motion carries unanimously. And our next and final under new business is first reading and adoption of revised policy 3460. Sandy and Dr. Parker.
Sandy Kinzel, I will yield the floor to Dr. Parker as these policies were directly related to the presentation he made earlier and were an outcome of some of the changes that are being made to the master calendar at the secondary level. So, Dr. Parker?
Thank you, Sandy. Want to present 2 policy revisions to the Board of Education that are resulting from the changes that have taken place in the high school bell schedule. As I mentioned earlier, students can now receive up to 8 high school course credits a year. Previously, they could receive 7. And so we are at a need to revise our board policy because our board policy previously had language that said students were required to receive -4 of their maximum potential credits. And so previously on that 7 credit a year, the maximum potential would have been 8 minus 4. That put kids at needing 24 credits to graduate. We want to adjust that because now kids can receive up to 32 credits in their high school career. If we use that -4 language, that would put them at 28. And that is 6 credits over what the state requires at 22. So we don't want to put students in a place where that's a bit too ambitious and may have an impact on their graduation happening in 4 years. We want it to happen in 4 years, not 5. And so we think that changing that to 26 credits is a great adjustment. And so we'd be removing the maximum potential -4 language and just going with a straight 26 credit requirement for all high school students. Again, that would be, there's ample ability for kids to receive those credits because again, they'll get up to 32. Any questions on that?
Are you asking for approval this evening, or is this just first read?
What we're asking the board to do, if they would consider that, is to waive the second reading and pass this on the first. I did want to mention one quick thing, though, on that particular policy, Madam Chair. We gave you an updated copy that's got some revision in yellow that we added. We also wanted to make sure we included in there that we adjust the course credits for current students. So for example, seniors this year, it wouldn't be fair to hold them to 26 because going into the year they thought they'd have 24. They may not have had enough time to get to 26. So that language we've highlighted in yellow you receive today, and that creates a gradual release of those students so that they're not bound to the 26. It would have incoming freshmen this year begin the 26 credit. So that's one piece, and then we made some small revisions in 3420 that reflect what I just said, and so if it was at the board's pleasure, we'd like to recommend that we waive the second read and pass on the first.
And we did include that in the statement at the beginning, that it be asked to be adopted on first read when we amended.
Keith, I have one question. What was the reasoning behind, this is Susan Bothwell, What was the reasoning behind eliminating the graduation project?
That's a great question. In part because some changes have taken place at the state level on what is required and what is not of that project. So it's not required for every district to engage in that project as it previously was. And also there was some changes from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction on requirements districts had to oblige by if they did the project. And when we got feedback from our principals, we didn't feel that it was in our best interest to go by these new guidelines. We do incorporate a lot of the research components of that project. Those happen in our English classes anyway. And Sandy, I think you could speak to those new requirements on the graduation project. Sandy's more versed in those than I am in terms of the new requirements that we didn't feel like we should follow.
Sandy Kinzel. A few years ago, the graduation project became optional as a part of, and it was included in the school report card and school performance grade as, you know, whether you did it or not. The project actually had several required components as dictated by the state to create some uniformity in it. And one of those projects is actually a physical project. So, you know, a student may have interest in construction field and then end up having to, you know, build something with the knowledge from the research piece. That can get very expensive and it's very time consuming. So again, understanding that it created some inequities just within itself, because if I had the means to be able to go out and build, you know, a tiny house for my project, it tended to, you know, impress. Then DPI came out with a requirement that stated that if we were going to require this project, then students would have to be compensated for materials and things associated with that type of a project, especially if they were free and reduced lunch or came from a disadvantaged situation. So those types of things kind of all played into it, and we felt like the equity piece that we could ensure was ensuring that students had a quality experience with research and writing a strong research paper, which will be something that will take them into an academic life after high school. So we felt like that was probably more important than the actual physical project. Long answer, but that's the history.
Anybody else have any other questions? Joe or David, you got the questions?
Do not. No. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, this is David. I move we waive the requirements
For the second reading for the reversion of policy 3460, graduation requirements of policy 3420, student promotion and accountabilities as required by policy 2420.
Second, Joe Tauber.
Did they make that right, Rich? Okay.
They nailed it.
Okay.
All right.
I'm shocked too.
I was like, wait a minute, did that sound right? Okay, motion on the floor by Mr. Twitty, second by Joe Tauber. Any other discussion? Okay. Carl,
Yay.
David,
Yay.
Joe,
Yes.
Frank,
Yay.
Susan,
Yes.
Margaret,
Yes.
Mary Ellen, yes. Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Anybody else have anything else to add?
We have to do the other one.
Now you need a separate motion to
right.
approve the policies.
Sorry.
Madam Chair, I move we approve the revisions to policy 3460, graduation requirements, to include those changes recommended this evening, and approve revisions to policy 3420, student promotion and accountability, on first read as required.
Susan
Requested,
Bothwell,
excuse
second.
me.
Motion by Ms. Lawler and a second by Ms. Bothwell. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none. Carl Woody,
Yay.
David Twitty,
Yay.
Joe Tauber, I heard that, Joe.
Yes.
Frank Hester,
Yes.
Susan Bothwell.
Yes.
Margaret Lawler,
Yes.
Mary Ellen Valance, yes. Motion carries unanimously. Anybody else have anything new?
I just want to thank Sandy, Johanna, and Candy. They're our calendar experts, and it takes a lot of time looking at different drafts and trying to follow all the different aspects of the law and the requirements, so thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would just like to thank all of you all in central office for all the, I don't know how many hours you've put into everything that we are looking at here, the calendar and the new schedule. And I know you meet with all the principals and they meet with the teachers. And none of this is done lightly at all. So thank you so much for your time and dedication.
I second that.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Well, I've got a motion by like 3 of us. We'll give it to Frank this time. Motion by Frank to adjourn.
I second.
Carl Woody with a second. Any other discussion?
You need a roll call.
You got a roll call. We got a roll call. Carl,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Margaret. And I am yes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.